Who's the stupidest person you've ever met, and what story perfectly sums up their stupidity? I knew this guy in high school that was a huge idiot. The best story about his stupidity happened when he and another friend got pulled over by the cops. Instead of acting like a normal person, he gets the hilarious idea to step out of the car and proceed to run as fast as he could down the block. The cops of course chase right after him. Not amused at all, he gets a couple of blocks away and decides to turn around, put his hands up in the air, and scream, "Psych." The cops of course did not find any humor in this situation and tackled him to the ground and arrested him. Keep in mind this was before YouTube prank videos, so he wasn't doing it to gain subscribers or anything. He did it because he was a moron. There was a troubled kid I went to high school with. He struggled with school but had friends but was starting to do drugs and go down a bad way. He decided to photocopy the front and back side of a $20 bill, cut it out of normal paper, and glue the two halves with Elmer's glue. What's even more sad is that to test his new money he went to the gas station and bought some gum and it actually worked. So in his mind it must have meant that it was foolproof. So he then tried to go and deposit the glued up money at an actual bank. He was obviously found out and arrested. I don't know where he is now, but I'm assuming he is making similar life choices. My brother's, now ex-girlfriend, super kind lady. When she found out I was a vegan she literally went through every kind of meat she knew of and asked if I could eat it. It was a little painful. Cute story about the same girl. Anytime we would go on a road trip and she saw cows she would always softly moo under her breath, even if she was in mid-conversation. First one's kinda just like she was curious and went about it the wrong way, but the second one is pretty heartwarming. Had a guy in a third year undergrad developmental psych course raise his hand in a full lecture hall and ask the professor, "Prof, do infants diagnosed with SIDS get asthma later in life? Like, are they more likely to get asthma?" Double quote. SIDS stands for sudden infant death syndrome. He just kept pursuing the question. The prof didn't understand how she could answer it. She thought there was some kind of logic in it that she wasn't seeing. Finally some girl took the initiative to shout across the room, "No, they are not more likely to get asthma. They are dead. They have died suddenly, and will thus not be at risk of developing asthma." Great day. He always sat in front of me and I would see him writing just absolutely horrible poetry and song lyrics. An old co-worker named James. We worked at McDonald's and were both 16. One time, while mopping the lobby, he for some unknown reason decided to chase a number of customers around with a mop yelling, "I'm gonna getcha." He was fired on the spot. A guy told me a story about him drunk driving, crashing and getting his friend in the passenger seat killed. He was chuckling while telling this story. The dumbest person I ever met was my friend's Uncle Frankie. Growing up, my buddy and I worked in his father's insurance office during the summers. One day Uncle Frankie comes in to use a computer so he could compose an email. It was the first time. This was in 2009. As he was trying to add the @ symbol in the recipient's name, he asked where he could find it. I told him to hold down the shift button and press the number 2 key at the same time. He turned his head, and with a puzzled look in his eyes he asked me, "Wouldn't that be a capital 2? Double quote. My high school classmate whose name is Nick. We were in chemistry, doing a lab practical, which required the use of a bulb pipette, a glass pipette with a removable bulb that you squeeze. Nick didn't know how to use the pipette, so he put it to his mouth to suck up sulfuric acid. It got about 3/4 of the way up before our teacher screamed, "Nick, stop that right now." This one lady at Atlanta's beer, bourbon and barbecue festival who clearly didn't know where she was. I'm getting started on this rack of ribs, quietly minding my own business with a glass of beer, when from the group in front of me this lady comes up to me and tells me how she can't stand the smell of meat, roasted or smoked, and tells me to get away from there. This is despite the fact that the event's name has barbecue in it and she had to pay $40 to get in. After she left, I had a good chuckle and fassapum with another lady at the table. But God, I've never seen more stupid in my life. I once had a property manager, person in charge of the rental I lived in since homeowners who lived out of state, who did a bunch of obnoxious things. My husband and I thought she was greedy and maybe getting money for herself and hiding it from the homeowners for repairs or something like that because of shady seeming things she would do when we had repairs. Then we mentioned something about gardening. She said, you know, I've always wanted to try growing tomatoes and just watering them with salt water. That way, the tomatoes would already be salted when you ate them. Double quote. Huge reminder to never attribute to malice what is just pure old-fashioned being dumb as a rock. I have a friend named Rachel. Now this one night's in high school. We all got the munchies and decided to go get ourselves some late night Sonic. We pile into Rachel's car even though we've heard stories about her bad driving, but that's another story. Anyway, she asks us how to get to Sonic and we proceed to give her direction turn for turn until we finally pull into the Sonic parking lot. Upon our arrival, she smirks and says, "Oh, I work here." Double quote. There was this girl I knew in high school. She would constantly say or do stupid things. Examples. She drew a cover page for a unit in science class, where she drew Earth and put ground underneath it. Asked what light bulbs did cavemen use? Double quote. Argued that she wasn't a homo sapien because she liked men. This girl I went to school with thought Earth had 2 moons and adamantly argued with me and a teacher. Edit. I should have included more information, but I am new to this, so I apologize. The girl thought that there were 2 moons of the same size, one on each half of Earth. She thought that the Earth didn't rotate while in orbit. She also thought that since the sun was so big and bright that it blocked the moon during the day. None of anything she said made sense and she would not answer any further questions or follow up with any rebuttals. I did not try to make her feel stupid. I don't like doing that to anyone for any reason, and once I saw how set she was on what she believed, I backed off because I'm not one to force any views, beliefs, facts, or opinions on someone. And I never said that I don't give my opinion or view or that I don't present facts. I do. I will always say what I have to say. But after a certain period of time, when a conversation comes to a complete standstill and nothing is getting through to a person, I do choose to walk away, and I do so knowing that I tried my best and nothing I can do will be effective. Guy in my aircraft technician class. I'll call him Jim. The module at the time was about electrical power. We were having a review one Friday before the exam started. Earlier that week we had covered the batteries used on the aircraft. What types, how they were constructed, etc. Trainer turns to Jim and asks him about the different types, expecting him to say lead acid, lithium ion and so on. Nope. Jim thinks for a moment and says AA, AAA, C, apostrophe. When we got to the hangar for work experience, the same trainer had lost all faith in Jim. We were all assigned jobs in the morning. Me and another guy on wings, couple more on landing gear, all down through the group. Then he gets to Jim, placed an A4 sheet of paper on the ground and told Jim to stand on it so it didn't blow away. We all laughed, Jim included. The trainer was joking, right? He wasn't joking. Jim stood there all day. I worked on a hay press for about a month. Most guys had high school education. One particular guy was telling me about a girl he was talking to on Tinder or some various dating chat app, when he said that she was in New York and that he wanted to go visit her. I told him that that's pretty cool and New York will be quite the change from our little town. He then asked me how close New York was. We were in Washington state. He had no idea New York was over 2,000 miles away. My friend's father robbed a bank in a small town in Indiana where he lived. This was in the late 70s or early 80s. He spent 10 years in prison for the crime. The same day he was released from prison, he robbed the same bank again. He was caught and back to prison he goes. He did not learn in those 10 years not to rob any banks or anything in that matter. My friend was like, this is what every father does, and did not seem shocked over it. Work with a guy who honestly believes he will not die. Also believes that doctors are part of the system and that they lie to you for profit and personal gain. He does believe in Eastern traditional medicine however. And if you're interested to know his secret to eternal life, it's 6 raw eggs a day and a keto diet. Guy I worked with named Buddy bought a huge snap-on roll-away toolbox for over $3,000 on credit. 2 days later, he sold it to a co-worker for $1,500 because he had some overdue bills and had to pay them. Needless to say, he never paid Snap-on for the toolbox. He was off into the winds after he was fired for starting his 4th fist fight at work. One of the other guys I worked with told the Snap-on salesman where Buddy's new job was. And last we heard they are now garnishing his wages. Guy was a nutcase though. He had very thin skin and the slightest thing would set him off. He's go absolutely nuts when he was set off though. He yelled at the security guard and threatened to have him fired because he didn't like his tone. He almost got fired 3 times for fighting. But he was able to win the department manager over until the 4th time. Oh. And one time he was told to put caution tape across a malfunctioning gate and he said I don't know how. Double quote. I knew this guy in high school really thought his practical jokes were hilarious. He would just do stuff designed to piss you off, thinking your salty reaction would make it funny. You may be thinking this guy's a dick and you'd be right. But he's also incredibly stupid. Because every time someone said dude, F-king chill out with your bullshit, he just blew it off. Social stupidity I guess. Well, one day he knocked this kid's hat off his head. These guys were friends but clearly there was some hostility. Other kid picks up his hat and tells Pranker to FCK off. Pranker smacks his hat again. Other kid tells him if Pranker knocks his hat off a 3rd time, he'd knock Pranker's head off. Pranker has a tea-eating grin, completely oblivious to how dead serious this guy was, and got absolutely clocked in the face when he F-ked with this guy's hat a 3rd time. All he could say was what the FCK man, chill out. But no one was willing to hear him out. There was this guy at my high school that wasn't too bright and was mostly harmless, but about halfway through decided he was gonna be a thug. One day he goes into a class of 1st years when their teacher wasn't there and robs all their electronics, cash and valuables at knife point without covering his face, and before he left gave them his real name saying, "And you better not tell them it was me, Jim Conrad, that stole all your stuff." He then proceeded to leave school grounds with all the stolen stuff but decides against stashing it off campus, and so came back with all the stolen stuff in his backpack and went back to spy on the class with his backpack full of loot while police officers were there taking statements to make sure they weren't ratting him out. Edit. For those that want the end of the story but it's too buried to find. The kids all rat him out, and when he hears his name he steps into the class proclaiming he'd gut them if they didn't take back saying he did it. With the officers still in the class and all his loot on his back, he was expelled and arrested, and when word got to our year group everyone just facepalmed. Edit 2. I don't know why he's so stupid, but it wasn't an isolated act of idiocy. It was quite well known by everyone in my year group how dumb he was. In fact, he didn't even qualify for admission, but his family called in a ton of favors to get him in on recommendation. I had manager named Roxanne, Rocky. She was a bleach blonde, literally bleached her hair once a month and then wondered why it fell out, bubblehead who only had the job because daddy owned the restaurant. Rocky was really obsessed with her looks and not much else. One day she told me, and a co-worker, that she had her nose job done so that her eventual children wouldn't grow up with the same nose as her. She wasn't kidding. The co-worker and I just looked at each other and walked away. We knew it wasn't worth the effort. Old co-worker of mine. He was helping me move, and while we were carrying a couch he dropped it. Thinking he was hurt, I asked if he was okay, and with the most serious and frightening look in his eyes he said, pointing, "Look, it's the moon and it's daytime." He was 25 at the time. My mom's cousin was the getaway driver when his friends held up a 7-11. He had some outstanding tickets at the time. As he was driving his moron friends him home, he sped past a cop, who inevitably pulled him over. He defended his bad driving by telling the cop he was just the getaway driver. Then he got arrested. He has since been arrested for a series of other similarly stupid crimes. He also believes that there's a global cabal of Jews who are out to get him. Recently, he got a DUI, which got his license revoked. This was obviously because of the Jews and not because he decided to drive drunk past a police station when he was denied a gun license. That was the Jews at work. I have no idea why he thinks a global cabal would be focused on some moron from Saskatchewan. Literally, this guy got fired last week for doing this. Whenever a customer would enter the store, he would mimic everything they said. Whilst already bad enough, he would try his best to copy their accent too, no matter what accent it was. Multiple complaints to our store have been made about this guy and he had plenty of warnings. Well, last week he finally got fired while serving an Asian customer, and in full view of our manager he says this. "Hero, who would you like a brag?" Double quote. Got pulled into the office where apparently he still maintained he'd done nothing wrong and couldn't understand why he was being fired. Definitely a dumbus. My ex-husband. We were playing rock paper scissors to decide who had to go change the baby. Best 2 of 3. Round 1. I throw scissor and he throws rock. I win, he proclaimed. Round 2. I throw paper and he throws rock. I win, he says again. Paper beats rock, I tell him. His response? No. Rock beats everything. I spend like 5 minutes trying to wrap my mind around this. Finally I ask him then. What's the point of even playing? Double quote. In total sincerity he says to have fun. Double quote. Clarification edits. 1. No. Sadly, he was not trolling me. He was completely serious. I know it's hard to believe, but in all fairness he was born and raised in Florida. 2. Yes. I changed the baby. I did pretty much everything involving the baby after that. 3. As for my own level of intelligence and that of my son, I think he said it best himself when, at 4 years old, he said to me, "Daddy can't help it. What's your excuse?" Double quote. The first time I met Ben was in Improv 101. I was only taking the class for fun, but about half the people there were aspiring actors, including Ben. On the first day, the teacher had us all play this silly game to break the ice, and so we'd all remember each other's names. The rules are pretty simple. 1. Pick an adjective that starts with the same letter as your first name. 2. Introduce yourself using adjective plus first name. And 3. Do a simple gesture that goes with it. So everyone is going around the circle, introducing themselves as Daring Daniel and Lonely Lauren and Awesome Alex. Until we get to Ben. Ben introduces himself as Surfer Ben. Double quote. He proceeded to misunderstand at least one key element of every game or exercise for the rest of the class. I have no clue how this man functions in daily life. He has since managed to get a few featured extra roles on TV, though. I worked with a man named Roy. Roy had theories about how to live life. Royconomics. One day, he turned to me and the other member of the crew. "You boys wanna know how you get nice things?" he asked. "You go to the store, and you finance everything. New furniture, new appliances, televisions, stereos, everything. Then, you don't make any payments, and you don't show up for your court date. They'll end up garnishing your wages, but they take way less than the payments would have been." Double quote. Then, about a week later, "You boys wanna know how you buy a house? You apply for every credit card you can possibly get. You take out your entire balance in cash from all of them, and you use that for your down payment. Then, you don't make any payments, and you don't show up for your court date." Double quote. For people thinking that they may know this specific Roy, I last saw him 10 years ago. At that time, he was in his early 50s, was rocking a grey blonde skullet, and lived in a hamlet in the province of Saskatchewan. This girl I used to work with before she got fired. One day she came to work with a broken arm and claimed her boyfriend pushed her during a fight and she fell. We all were super concerned for her until she came in a week later saying she stabbed her boyfriend in the hand during a fight to get back at him for breaking her arm. Then a few weeks later she told everyone she was secretly trying to get pregnant. Because if she got pregnant her unemployed boyfriend would have to get a job and help pay rent. She got pregnant and her boyfriend immediately dumped her. Guy I went high school with was at a party and asked the homeowner if he could have her tattoo kit. She obviously said no. He left and came back an hour later with a ski mask on demanding for the tattoo kit. Was arrested the next day. Can't make up that kind of stupidity. I've posted this story before but this seems like another appropriate thread for this story. One night during high school, my friend and I got invited to a party. I didn't drive back then so my friend picked me up. All went well on our way to the party. On the way back however, he got pulled over. As we were pulling to the side of the road, I told him that I was gonna pretend to be sleeping, since I was the passenger. Anyway, I hear the cop get out of his cop car, walk towards our car, stops at the window but doesn't say anything. I can feel the brightness of his flashlight but I don't hear him or my friend say anything. After about what seemed like an eternity, I decide to open my eyes to see what's going on. That's when I see my friend, the guy who is driving, is pretending like he is sleeping too.